Hello, I'm Ian Munson, and you're watching Chapter Select. Today we're going to start our adventures in Chapter 2 of The Once and Future King and continue going with Artorious through the lands of Balatoria. Now, I've sped up this first part just to get us back to where we died at the end of the first video, get all that stuff you've already seen right out of the way, and after that we'll have a little bit of quiet while I get through the first boss and some more important cutscenes in there. So if you're just here for the book, go ahead and join me at 20 minutes and 15 seconds. We'll see you there.
Come back. The monumental awaits the above. The monumental will explain the nexus to thee. We have long awaited you, slayer of demons. I am one of the monumentals. We preserve the fabric of reality. There is a tale I wish to tell you. Once, we too a scourge of demons faced. In the distant past, under benevolent rule, the world was united owing to the soul arts. Until a lust for power caused the awakening of the Old One. Across the land seeped a colorless, deep fog, and the world faced extinction at the hands of the demons. Thanks be, we were able to lull the Old One back to its slumber, yet only after the loss of innumerable souls, and most of the world, lost, erased by the fog. In order to mend the fabric of what lands still remained, we entrusted 6 leaders with 6 precious archstones. One to the king of a small yet industrious land. One to the king of the burrowers underground. One to the wise queen of the great ivory tower. One to the chieftain of lost and ill-fortuned souls. One to the shaman of the tempest-worshipping shadowmen. And the last to the great giants of the northern lands. The archstones were placed in the fringelands that survived. We contained the Old One here below the nexus and prohibited the soul arts. Finally, we became monumentals, half-living sentinels of the fabric of reality. Alas, the other monumentals have perished, and only I remain. Now it is your turn. You must lull the Old One back to its slumber and seal it away for all eternity. If not, the deep fog will absorb all that we know. Have you the strength to bear this burden? Yes, we are fortunate indeed to have you. Now, go forth and destroy every last demon. The Old One, without demons to feed its souls, will a new servant seek and lure you to its bosom.
Monumental? Those fools revived the Old One on a whim. And now, they've trapped us here in the Nexus in a desperate attempt to undo their mistake. It's all a travesty, if you ask me.
Brave soul, for whom death is no fear. Prithee, lull the old one back to its ancient slumber. What is it? Seekest thou the power of souls? Of course. After all, thou requirest strength. Go ahead. Touch the demon inside me. Let these vagabond souls become thine own. Soul of the mind, key to life's ether. Soul of the lost, withdrawn from its vessel. Let strength be granted so the world might be mended. So the world might be mended. Art thou finished? May thy strength help the world be mended.
I would be happy to lighten you. When the scourge came, I abandoned my wife and daughter and fled like a coward. When I came to, I was in this nexus. I haven't dared venture outside these walls since. I wish I could do more, but I am ignorant of the world beyond these walls. My candle maiden cared for me during my She says very little, but has a kind heart. Poor girl. Trapped here with her eyes occluded by wax. If only something could be done to help her. Best of luck to you. That ornament. That belongs to my daughter. Then she didn't make it after all. My dearest little baby. May she rest in peace. May I ask a favor? Would you mind giving me that hair ornament? I'd like to have it in memory of my daughter. You're a saint. Thank you. Thank you so much. I mustn't forget. It's not much, but please accept this as thanks. I found it discarded on the main road. It might look ordinary, but it seems to possess a strange power. Anyway, I feel that you should have it. It will be happier in your hands.
You new here? Are you here for my services? The name's Baldwin. I'm just an ordinary blacksmith. It's simple. Just bring me all the souls you can. In trade, I'll give you weapons, or forge the ones you already have. With your souls, I can eke out a living. And with my weapons, you can go on living. Not a bad deal, eh? You come back alive. I need your business.
A good while later, when they had been whistling and luring and following the disturbed and sulky hawk from tree to tree, Kay lost his temper. "Let him go, then," he said. "He is no use anyway." "Oh, we could not leave him," cried the Wart. "What would Hobbs say?" "It is my hawk, not Hobbs," exclaimed Kay furiously. "What does it matter what Hobbs says? He is a servant." "But Hob made Cully. It is all right for us to lose him, because we do not have to sit up with him 3 nights and carry him all day and all that. But we can't lose Hobbs' hawk. It would be beastly." "Serve him right, then. He is a fool, and it is a rotten hawk. Who wants a rotten, stupid hawk? You would better stay yourself if you are so keen on it. I'm going home." "I will stay," said the Wart sadly. "If you will send Hob when you get there?" Kay began walking off in the wrong direction, raging in his heart because he knew that he had flown the bird when he was not properly in yard, and the Wart had to shout after him the right way. When the latter sat down under the tree and looked up at Cully like a cat watching a sparrow, with his heart beating fast. It was well enough for Kay, who was not really keen on hawking, except in so far as it was the proper occupation for a boy in his station of life, but the Wart had some of the falconer's feelings, and knew that a lost hawk was the greatest possible calamity. He knew that Hob had worked on Cully for 14 hours a day to teach him his trade, and that his work had been like Jacob's struggle with the angel. When Cully was lost, a part of Hob would be lost too. The Wart did not dare face the look of reproach which would be in the falconer's eye after all that he had tried to teach them. What was he to do? He had better sit still, leaving the lure on the ground so that the Cully would settle down and come in his own time. But Cully had no intention of doing this. He had been given a generous gorge the night before, and he was not hungry. A day had put him in a bad temper. The waving and whistling of the boys below, and the pursuit of him from tree to tree, had disturbed his ever-powerful brains. Now he did not quite know what he wanted to do, but it was not what anybody else wanted. He thought perhaps it would be nice to kill something from spite. A long time after that, the Wart was on the verge of the true forest, and Cully was inside it. In a series of infuriating removes, they had come nearer and nearer, till they were further from the castle than the boy had ever been, and now they had reached it quite. Wart would not have been frightened of an English forest nowadays, but the great jungle of Old England was a different matter. It was not only that there were wild boars in it, whose sounders would at this season be furiously rooting about, nor that one of the surviving wolves might be slinking behind any tree, with pale eyes and slavering chops. The mad and wicked animals were not the only inhabitants of the crowded gloom. When men themselves became wicked, they took refuge there, outlaws cunning and bloody as the Gore Crow, and as persecuted. The Wart thought particularly of one man named Wart, whose name the cottagers used to frighten their children with. He had once lived in Sir Ector's village, and the Wart could remember him. He squinted, had no nose, and was weak in his wits. The children threw stones at him. One day he turned on the children and caught one and made a snarly noise and bit off his nose too. Then he ran into the forest. They threw stones at the child with no nose now, but Wat was supposed to be in the forest still, running on all fours and dressed in skins. There were magicians in the forest also in those legendary days, as well as strange animals not known to modern works of natural history. There were regular bands of Saxon outlaws, not like Wart, who lived together and wore green and shot with arrows which never missed. There were even a few dragons, though these were small ones which lived under stones and could hiss like a kettle. Added to this was the fact that it was getting dark. The forest was trackless, and nobody in the village knew what was on the other side. The evening hush had fallen, and the high trees stood looking at the Wart without a sound. He felt that it would be safer to go home, while he still knew where he was. But he had a stout heart, and did not want to give in. He understood that once Cully had slept in freedom for a whole night, he would be wild again and irreclaimable. Cully was a passenger. But if the poor Wart could only mark him to roost, and if Hob would only arrive with a dark lantern, they might still take him that night by climbing the tree while he was sleepy and muddled with the light. The boy could see more or less where the hawk had perched, about 100 yards within the thick trees, because the home-going rooks of evening were mobbing that place. He made a mark on one of the trees outside the forest, hoping that it might help him to find his way back, and then began to fight his way into the undergrowth as best he might. He heard by the rooks that Cully had immediately moved farther off. The night fell still as the small boy struggled with the brambles, but he went on doggedly, listening with all his ears, and Cully's evasions became sleepier and shorter until at last, before the utter darkness fell, he could see the hunched shoulders in a tree above him against the sky. Wart sat down under the tree so as not to disturb the bird any further as it went to sleep, and Cully, standing on one leg, ignored his existence. "Perhaps," said the Wart to himself, "even if Hob does not come, and I do not see how he can very well follow me in this trackless woodland now, I shall be able to climb up by myself at about midnight and bring Cully down. He might stay there at about midnight because he ought to be asleep by then. I could speak to him softly by name so that he thought it was just the usual person coming to take him up while hooded. I shall have to climb very quietly. Then if I do get him, I shall have to find my way home, and the drawbridge will be up. But perhaps somebody will wait for me, for Kay will have told them I am out. I wonder which way it is. I wish Kay had not gone." He snuggled down between the roots of the tree, trying to find a comfortable place where the hard wood did not stick into his shoulder blades. "I think the way was behind that big spruce with the spiked top. I have to try to remember which side of me the sun is setting, so that when it rises I may keep it on the same side going home. Something move under that spruce tree, I wonder. Oh, I wish I may not meet that old wild Wart and have my nose bitten off. How aggravating Cully looks, standing there on one leg, as if there was nothing the matter." At this there was a quick whir and a smack, and the Wart found an arrow sticking in the tree between the fingers of his right hand. He snatched his hand away, thinking he had been stung by something, before he noticed it was an arrow. Then everything went slow. He had time to notice quite carefully what sort of an arrow it was, and how it had driven 3 inches into the solid wood. It was a black arrow with yellow bands around it, like a wasp, and its cock feather was yellow. The 2 others were black. They were dyed goose feathers. The Wart found that, although he was frightened of the danger of the forest before it happened, once he was in it, he was not frightened any more. He got up quickly, but it seemed to him slowly, and went behind the other side of the tree. As he did this, another arrow came whir and frump, but this one buried all except its feathers in the grass, and stayed still, as if it had never moved. On the other side of the tree, he found a waste of bracken, 6 foot high. This was splendid cover, but it betrayed his whereabouts by rustling. He heard another arrow hiss through the fronds, and what seemed to be a man's voice cursing, but it was not very near. Then he heard the man, or whatever it was, running about in the bracken. It was reluctant to fire any more arrows because they were valuable things and would certainly get lost in the undergrowth. Wart went like a snake, like a coney, like a silent owl. He was small, and the creature had no chance against him at this game. In 5 minutes, he was safe. The assassin searched for his arrows and went away grumbling. But the Wart realized that, even if he was safe from the archer, he had lost his way and his hawk. He had not the faintest idea where he was. He lay down for half an hour, pressed under the fallen tree where he had hidden to give time for the thing to go right away, for his own heart to cease thundering. It had begun beating like this as soon as he knew that he had got away. "Oh," he thought, "now I am truly lost, and now there is almost no alternative except to have my nose bitten off, or to be pierced right through with one of those waspy arrows, or to be eaten by a hissing dragon, or a wolf, or a wild boar, or a magician, if magicians do eat boys, which I expect they do. Now I may well wish that I had been good, and not angered the governess when she got muddled with her astrolabe, and had loved my dear guardian Sir Ector as much as he deserved." At these melancholy thoughts, and especially at the recollection of kind Sir Ector, with his pitchfork and his red nose, the poor Wart's eyes became full of tears. He lay most desolate beneath the tree. The sun finished the last rays of its lingering goodbye, and the moon rose in awful majesty over the silver treetops before he dared to stand. Then he got up and dusted the twigs out of his jerkin, and wandered off forlorn, taking the easiest way and trusting himself to God. He had been walking like this for about half an hour, and sometimes feeling more cheerful, because it really was very cool and lovely in the summer forest by moonlight, when he came upon the most beautiful thing that he had seen in his short life so far. There was a clearing in the forest, a wide sward of moonlit grass, and the white rays shone full upon the tree trunks on the opposite side. These trees were beeches, whose trunks are always more beautiful in a pearly light, and among the beeches there was the smallest movement and a silvery clink. Before the clink, there were just the beeches, but immediately afterward there was a knight in full armor, standing still and silent and unearthly among the majestic trunks. He was mounted on an enormous white horse that stood as rapt as its master, and he carried in his right hand, with its butt resting on the stirrup, a high, smooth jousting lance, which made up among the tree stumps higher and higher, till it was outlined against the velvet sky. All was moonlit, all silver, too beautiful to describe. The Wart did not know what to do. He did not know whether it would be safe to go up to this knight, for there were so many terrible things in the forest that even the knight might be a ghost. Most ghostly he looked, too, as he hovered meditating in the confines of the gloom. Eventually, the boy made up his mind that even if it were a ghost, it would be the ghost of a knight, and knights were bound by their vows to help people in distress. "Excuse me," said the Wart when he was right under the mysterious figure, "but can you tell me the way back to Sir Ector's castle?" At this the ghost jumped so that it nearly fell off its horse, and gave out a muffled "Brrr!" through its visor, like a sheep. "Excuse me," began the Wart again, and stopped, terrified in the middle of his speech, for the ghost lifted up its visor, revealing two enormous eyes, frosted like ice, exclaimed in an anxious voice, What?" Took off its eyes, which turned out to be horn-rimmed spectacles, fogged by being inside the helmet, tried to wipe them on the horse's mane, which only made them worse, lifted both hands above its head, and tried to wipe them on its plume, dropped its lance, dropped the spectacles, got off the horse to search for them, the visor shutting in the process, lifted its visors, bent down for the spectacles, stood up again as the visor shut once more, and exclaimed in a plaintive voice, "Oh dear!" The Wart found the spectacles, wiped them, and gave them to the ghost, who immediately put them on, the visor shut at once, and began scrambling back on its horse for dear life. When it was there, it held out its hand for the lance, which the Wart handed up, and feeling all secure, opened the visor with his left hand, and held it open. It peered at the boy with one hand up, like a lost mariner searching for land, and exclaimed, "Aha! Who have we here, what?" "Please," said the Wart, "I am a boy whose guardian is Sir Ector." "Charming fella," said the knight. "Never met him in me life." "Can you tell me the way back to his castle?" "Faintest idea. Stranger in these parts myself." "I'm lost," said the Wart. "Funny thing that. Now I've been lost for 17 years. Name of King Pellinore," continued the knight. "May have heard of me, what?" The visor shut with a pop, like an echo to the Wart, but was opened again immediately. 17 years ago, come Michaelmas. And been after the questing beast ever since. Boring, very." "I should think it would be," said the Wart, who had never heard of Pellinore, nor of the questing beast, but he felt this was the safest thing to say in the circumstances. "It is the burden of the Pellinores," said the king proudly. "Only a Pellinore can catch it. That is, of course, or his next of kin. Train all the Pelennors with that idea in mind. Limited education, rather. Fumets and all that. I know what fumets are, said the boy with interest. They are the droppings of the beast pursued. The harborer keeps them in his horn to show his master, and can tell by them whether it is a warrantable beast or otherwise, and what state it is in. Intelligent child, remarked the king. Very. Now I carry fumets about with me practically all the time. And sanitary habit, he added, beginning to look dejected, and quite pointless. Only one questing beast, you know, so there can't be any question whether she is warrantable or not. Here his visor began to droop so much that the wart decided he had better forget his own troubles and try to cheer his companion by asking questions on the one subject about which he seemed qualified to speak. Even talking to a lost royalty was better than being alone in the wood. What does the questing beast look like? Ah, we call it the beast Gladysant, you know, replied the monarch, assuming a learned air and beginning to speak quite volubly. Now the beast Gladysant, or as we say in English, the questing beast, you may call it either, he added graciously. This beast has the head of a serpent, and the body of a lizard, and the haunches of a lion, and he is footed like a hart. Wherever this beast goes, he makes a noise in his belly, as it had been the noise of 30 couple of hounds questing, except when he is drinking, of course, added the king. Must be a dreadful kind of monster, said the wart, looking about him anxiously. A dreadful monster, repeated the king. It is the beast Gladysant. And how do you follow it? This seemed to be the wrong question, for Pelennor began to look even more depressed. I have a brachette, he said sadly. There she is, over there. The wart looked in the direction which had been indicated by a despondent thumb, and saw a lot of rope wound around a tree. The other end of the rope was tied to King Pellennor's saddle. I do not see her very well. Wound herself round the other side, I dare say. She always goes the opposite way from me. The wart went over to the tree and found a large white dog scratching herself for fleas. As soon as she saw the wart, she began wagging her whole body, grinning vacuously and panting in her efforts to lick his face, in spite of the cord. She was too tangled up to move. It's quite a good brachette, said King Pelennor, only it pants so, and gets wound round things, and goes the opposite way. Well, with that in the visor, what? I sometimes don't know which way to turn. Why don't you let her loose? Asked the wart. She would follow the beast just as well like that. She goes right away then, you see, and I don't see her sometimes for a week. Gets a bit lonely without her, added the king. Following the beast about, and never knowing where one is. Makes a bit of company, you know. She seems to have a friendly nature. Too friendly. Sometimes I doubt whether she is really chasing the beast at all. What does she do when she sees it? Nothing. Oh, well, said the wart. I dare say she will get to be interested in it after a few times. It is 8 months, anyway, since we saw the beast at all. The poor fellow's voice had grown sadder and sadder since the beginning of the conversation, and now he definitely began to snuffle. It is the curse of the Pelennors, he exclaimed. Always mollocking about after that beastly beast. What on earth use is she, anyway? First you have to stop to unwind the brachette, then your visor falls down, then you can't see through your spectacles, nowhere to sleep, never know where you are, rheumatism in the winter, sunstroke in the summer. All this horrid armor takes hours to put on. When it is on, it's either frying or freezing, and it gets rusty. You have to sit up all night polishing the stuff. Oh, how I do wish I had a nice house of my own to live in, a house with beds in it, and real pillows and sheets. If I was rich, that's what I would buy. A nice bed with a nice pillow and a nice sheet that you could lay in, and then I would put this beastly horse in a meadow and tell that beastly brachette to run away and play, and throw all this beastly armor out of the window and let that beastly beast go and chase himself. That I would. If you could show me the way home, said the wart craftily, I'm sure Sir Ector would put you in a bed for the night. Do you really mean it? Cried the king. In a bed? A feather bed. King Pellennor's eyes grew round as saucers. A feather bed? He repeated slowly. Would it have pillows? Down pillows. Down pillows? Whispered the king, holding his breath, and then letting it out in one rush. What a lovely house your gentleman must have. I do not think it is more than 2 hours away, said the Wart, following up his advantage. And did this gentleman really send you out to invite me in? He had forgotten about the Wart being lost. How nice of him, how very nice of him, I do think, what? He will be pleased to see us, said the Wart truthfully. Oh, how nice of him, exclaimed the king again, beginning to bustle about with his various trappings. And what a lovely gentleman he must be to have a feather bed. I suppose I should have to share it with somebody, he outed doubtfully. You could have one of your own. A feather bed of one's very own, with sheets and pillows. Perhaps even 2 pillows? Or a pillow with a bolster? And no need to get up in time for breakfast? Does your guardian get up in time for breakfast? Never, said the Wart. Fleas in a bed? Not one. Well, said King Pellinor, it does sound nice. Too nice for words, I must say. A feather bed, and none of those fumets for ever so long. How long did you say it would take us to get there? 2 hours, said the Wart, but he had to shout the second of these words, for the sounds were drowned in his mouth by a noise which had at that moment arisen close beside them. What was that? Exclaimed the Wart. Hark! Cried the king. Mercy! It is the beast. And immediately the loving huntsman had forgotten everything else, but was busied about his task. He wiped his spectacles upon the seat of his trousers, the only accessible piece of cloth about him, while the belling and bloody cry arose all around. He balanced them on the end of his nose, just before the visor automatically clapped to. He clutched his jousting lance in his right hand and galloped off in the direction of the noise. He was brought up short by the rope, which was wound round the tree. The vacuous Brachet, meanwhile, giving a melancholy yelp, and fell off his horse with a tremendous clang. In a second he was up again. The Wart was convinced that the spectacles must be broken, and hopping around the white horse with one foot in the stirrup. The girth stood the test, and he was in the saddle somehow, with his jousting lance between his legs, and then he was galloping around and round the tree in the opposite direction to the one in which the Brachet wound herself up. He went right round 3 times too often, the Brachet meanwhile running and yelping the other way, and then after 4 or 5 backcasts they were both free of the obstruction. Yoicks, what? Cried the King Pellinor, waving his lance in the air and swaying excitedly in the saddle. Then he disappeared into the gloom of the forest, with the unfortunate hound trailing behind him at the other end of the cord. Man, right when you think the Wart's gonna get out of trouble, he gets left in the woods once again, this time at night. Now, let's finish taking down this tower, Knight, and I hope you'll join me next time for Chapter 3. Real quick, like before we go, I want to give a huge shout out to my buddy Jimmy. If you've enjoyed the audio quality in this one, think it's a little better, he's the one to thank. He gave me this sweet Samson standalone mic to do this recording with, and I cannot thank him enough. Thank you again, dude. I love it.